Hey there! I thought this would be a little fun video of sorts discussing a lot of my thoughts on the current state of 4 stars in the game. I know when it comes to a lot of units people use, there tends to be a lot of variety in the mix, as well as a general consensus on what units are generally preferred over others. So today I thought it would be fun if I discussed what I thought were the best 4 stars in the game. Now, this isn't to say that they rank among necessarily the best in a general tier list sort of thing. It could be different with how they're positioned, for example. So let's say you have something like Young Marth in the highest tier for 4 stars, but then in a general tier list he's maybe like tier 2 of 5 or something like that. This is more so to cover my overall thoughts on what I believe are currently the best units in the game. Now also, I didn't make this list in particular. This was made by a good friend, Rafa. I'll have a link to his profile in the description, and I thought it would be fun to at least cover the first tier, go over my thoughts on that, and if this is something you want to see more in the future, I'd be happy to go through the entire list, maybe adjust a few things here or there depending on feedback, and give you my overall thoughts. But with that being said, we could just get started. First off, in the sword category, we have Elliot, and I think if anyone's been around the block, quote unquote, they'll basically know why Elliot's already as disgusting as he is. But Brave Roy's refine that he can get has built-in impact. The additional defense and speed he could get can bolster his mixed bulk even more, which is great. The special fighter that he comes with means he can Glaciers nuke with his high res stat, and he's super fast, which means a lot of units without no follow-up or natural speed are not going to be able to double him. And he's also a really solid Gale Force unit thanks to the amount of stats he gets overall from his weapon and impact. He doesn't really need to run Heavy Blade because he comes with special fighter in his weapon, which means he can further bolster his overall offense with something like Death Blow if you wanted to, or you can run the standard Hardy Bearing if you want to make it so he can't be vantaged. Overall, he's just a really solid Gale Force Glaciers nuke unit frontliner for Aether Raid's defense. I wouldn't say he's necessarily as strong on offense, but when it comes to the Aether Raid's defense meta, he's definitely one of the best there for a reason, and there's a reason why you see him everywhere in the game anyway. And then we have my favorite. We have Laszlo. I talk about him all the time. I love him. He's great. Now, Laszlo is one of the more interesting units overall that we have in the game because he has a dual phase brave weapon with no penalties attached. Moreover, it's not 11 might that most other weapons of that kind generally have, but rather it's a conditional dual phase brave and it's 19 might. Likewise, because his attack stat is relatively high, or it aged relatively well with a base of 35, he's going to be hitting like a truck, a massive truck. Moreover, because of the super boon in his speed stat, he can easily stack up speed if he wanted to in Aether Raid's offense, and that's not really an issue either, which means you can run stuff like Spurn, and overall he's just a really good general tank. You can run Null Counter Disrupt if you wanted to, Spurn, Vantage if you want to take full advantage of his attack stat. He's one of the most flexible sword units we have in the game, and overall I would say as far as Aether Raid's offense prowess goes, he's the best sword we have in the 4-star category. Now, Young Marth is also really solid because he has built-in Vantage in his blade as well as cav and armor effectiveness, which can be really good against matchups like Elliot and other frontliner cavs. Similarly, the Vantage he has in his blade means he can run stuff like Null Counter Disrupt, Special Spiral, Spurn. However, what sets him apart from Laszlo is the fact that he's going to be relying on one-shots a lot more because he can only, in the Vantage range, he's going to be relying on one-hit KOs a lot more often than Laszlo will because of the 2 hits he gets, which means he can charge up Glimmers, Moonbows, etc. However, he can run Special Spiral with Hero's Blood, and that's the other thing too, his his preferred special that he has, which is based off his speed stat, which is really solid too, because his speed stat is relatively good. He's also just another generally good Aether Raid's offense unit overall, because he deals with a lot of frontliner threats. And I would say he's one of the better 4-stars we have in the game for sure. And then, lastly, in our S tier, we have Zelith. Zelith is also very solid because of his auto follow-up. And it's not even just that. Divine Tearfang in general is one of the best weapons in the game, not only because of the auto follow-up, but the max potential of 10 attack and 10 defense it can grant, and 50 flat reduction on magic, which is massive. It means he could go up against hard-hitting magic users in the enemy phase way more easily than other units of his kind because of the flat 50% reduction. This means he could take on units such as Bramimend with no follow-up, take 50% of his hard-hitting attack out of the way, and finish him off with an additional plus 10 attack he gets from his weapon, and his relatively good attack stat. The only thing I would worry about a bit is that although he can stack speed, and it is relatively easy to stack speed on pretty much every unit in the game on offense, there can still be times where he himself is outsped, such as with Selena's, Ishtar's, with Windsweep. Likewise, there are also threats with guaranteed follow-up attacks, which can still pierce through Zelith. However, anything that generally deals damage towards his defense is not going to be doing as much because of the 10 additional defense he gets from his weapon. And overall, he's just really solid. There's not really much else I can really say outside of the auto follow-up and the additional stats and damage reduction he gets from his weapon. He's just really solid too as a carry. But I would still say, whether or not this is taken as a bias or not, which I'm hoping it isn't, I would still say the best Aether Raid's offense 4-star carry for swords is Laszlo, and then Elliot is the best sword we have for Aether Raid's defense as the 4-star. But there's nothing wrong with either using Young Marth or Zelith because they're both really good too. And then we skip all the way to Lances, and we just have Hilda. Hilda is a speedy lance armor, which means she can take advantage of Special Fighter, which is great. She's also generally an Aether Raid's offense carry as well, at least in my opinion. The fact that she has a relatively good speed set means she could take advantage of Special Fighter. All the lance inheritables we have in the game means that even though she doesn't have a preferred weapon to call for herself, she could still take full advantage of some of the best lances we have in the game. Similarly, we have saves in the game now, which means she could be a really good save unit with something like Candy Cane or anything of the sort that benefits off being near allies. But yeah, she's just a generally good 4-star armored demo, and I don't really have much else to say on that. Armors are just really good in general, and the fact that her stat line really complements a speedy build means she can take advantage of a lot of armor skills to the fullest. And then we have Reinhardt, and I don't really think I have to say anything on Reinhardt, mostly, you know, Dire Thunder, Double Death Blow, Resplendent, etc, low attack res. He hits hard, he'll do a lot of damage. The only thing he still has to watch out for are spurn units, because those can still mess him up. Even in Aether Raid's defense, where he could be where he will be shining a lot more. Even still, I don't think there's much I really need to say on Reinhardt either. It's Reinhardt. He's that good. And then we can move on to Noe. Noe is particularly interesting because she is one of the few units that have a DC refund. You have the distant counter built in, which is great because that frees up her A slot for a lot of skills. And we've been getting a lot of really good A skills as of the last year or so. And she can take full advantage of that. She gets a Spectrum 4 from her weapon, which helps raise up her overall stats and makes her a big stat ball. And it's great too because her weapon isn't 16 might, so the extra 4 attacks she could get from it helps a lot. And you have the debuff nullification, which means you can safely buff her as much as you want, and you won't be penalized by it, whether or not you're hit by some sort of panic. And because her stats are relatively flexible one way or the other, you can run her as a speedy dragon too. Or if you want, you could stack up her res and give her Dragon Wall. Or again, going back to the speed build, give her no follow-up. There's a lot you could do with Noe because of the fact that she has her free A slot, and she has debuff nullification. She's just a really strong Aether Raid's offense carry. Even though the penalty on her breath isn't the best, it's still, you could still work off of that with Soul and some sort of breath support, whether that's with Infantry Rush or Valoria. I wouldn't say it's necessarily the biggest issue. And then we have Raphael. Raphael is a cheat demote. He's basically a pseudo support Valoria who can dance, has pretty much the highest res stat in the game, and because he's infantry, he can infantry pulse, which means you can make him into a very solid support unit. You can run him with infantry pulse, you can run him with sabotages, and you could give him pretty much anything a dancer would benefit from, like Wings of Mercy, because he has that flexibility. Raphael is one of the better supports we have in the game, even with stuff like Legendary Azura and Peony and Duo Peony, etc, etc. Anyway, and then next we have Lex. Lex was a surprising demote for, I would say, many. I expected a dual phase Brave unit sometime that month, but I didn't think he would be the demote of all things. And he's a very solid demote. The dual phase Brave nature means he could be a solid frontliner, and thanks to his really high defense stat, he could be a really good threat against a lot of melee units that tend to go up in Aether Raid's offense. Granted, he will get screwed over by dragons, which still aren't the most common, but exist nonetheless. But because both of his attacks come out at once, he can stack up a 2 cooldown Pavis, or whatever the special was called, and then run Deflect Melee for really good survivability. I would say that's where his prowess lies, more in Aether Raid's defense than offense. Even though you can run him in offense, he's still prone to a lot of one-shots because of his low res. And I wouldn't say he's necessarily as good of a carry on offense because of the fact that he's a cav. Even still, he's one of the better frontliners we have in the game. And because it's a demote too, there's no reason why a lot of people couldn't build him. He's also relatively cheap to build too. But yeah, that's pretty much Lex. Really solid frontliner, also really decent in Aether Raid's offense, but I wouldn't really use him there as much. Still does good there though. And then we have Alphonse. Alphonse is another cheat demote in a sense because he's a completely min-maxed armor. He is a green tome, which means he could get access to stuff like Plug-in, he could get access to Unity Blooms, but also because he's an armor, he can take full advantage of Slick, he can take advantage of saves, he can take advantage of a lot of stuff. There's only so much to say on him. He's a really min-maxed armor who has access to a lot of these crazy good skills. Very solid 4-star unit, pretty much. There's not much to say. He's just really good. And same with Rayson. He's basically, the reason he's up here is because he's a 3-move dancer, and that's pretty much it. If he wasn't, I wouldn't really have much to say on him, but the 3-move is what puts him up here as well. And then for Lachesis, she can basically be a really solid support unit as well, because she has really high res, she's a dagger unit, and she can dance. Now the dance is always going to have some of the best utility in the game anyway, so you can't go wrong with that. And her high res stat means she can run Tamari and sabotages. Likewise, she has a really good attack stat, so if you wanted to turn her into a pseudo carry with Broadleaf, then you could. Granted, you're usually better off with something that's colorless for that kind of role, but there's nothing wrong with taking her as a Broadleaf user anyway, because her attack stat is relatively high. So yeah, as far as support capabilities go, she's also up there as a really solid dancer support unit. And then finally in the colorless section we have Raphael and Tethys. Raphael is solid due to the fact that he's not only in armor, but he has access to some of the best bows in the game. He has Spendthrift, he has Plug-in, those two basically. But also because he's in armor, he could be a far save armor if you really wanted to make him like that. His res isn't necessarily the best, but he has an amazing attack stat, which is phenomenal. And his res can be worked out with because you could give him stuff like Spendthrift, which can help raise it even more. The far save will help raise it even more. And you could still stack it up to Oblivion, even if he is on Aetheraide's defense. He's very solid on both offense and defense, and I have nothing but praise for him. The only thing I would worry about still is his res stat, because it is still low, but his attack stat is really high, which means he could still retaliate with hard-hitting bow attacks. And then finally we have Tethys. Tethys, like Lachesis, is pretty much going to be here for the same reason. She's a dagger with high res, which means she can make use of Tamari and sabotages. That's pretty much also why she's going to be up here too. She is also infantry, so she can try and use infantry pulse. I don't remember her HP stat, but it's still an option all the same. But yeah, similarly to Lachesis, that's pretty much why she's also up here. The color doesn't really matter as much because her attack stat isn't really good, so you don't really want to broadleaf with her anyway. You want to make full support out of her. But yeah, high res, dagger, triple sabotage user pretty much. Very, very, very solid. And that's pretty much the top 4 stars in the game, in my opinion. This didn't go over Grails. There's a separate Grail tier list that Rafa has, and I could go over that if you guys would like me to. Likewise, if there's anything you agree or disagree with in this chart, let me know. I could go over in another video if you guys would like me to. If this was something you like or are interested in hearing about more, leave a like, subscribe, tell me that, whoa man, that was epic bro, or something like that. And until next time, see you later.